Taoiseach, I want to raise the issue of our wastewater infrastructure with you, or rather our lack thereof. Taoiseach, I agree with the mantra that your government has repeats, and that's that we can't use this surplus to invest in current expenditure because, we can't rely on that money. It might run out, and then we're going to have cutbacks. But what we can do is invest it in necessary infrastructure. I want to focus in on Clare in particular because I know it best, but Clare is the same as every other county in the country, and in particular every other coastal county in the country. This year there's a new scheme and I welcome it. It's going to cost €6 million is for unsewered settlements, to put in a sewage infrastructure for the first time. Because Irish Water say, well, if there's no sewer there, no matter how bad the situation is, it's not our problem. And the County Council say, well, we don't have a water infrastructure remit anymore, so it's not our problem either. So it's nobody's problem, but it's all of our problem if we're pumping raw sewage into our rivers, into our streams, and into the sea. And that's what we're doing all over this state at the moment, as we run a surplus and do nothing about it. Now, I asked a couple of questions recently, and they were ruled out of order, actually, because the Minister has no responsibility to answer questions to the Dáil about Irish water. Now, I'd ask for in the first instance for your government's cooperation to fix that, because I do think that is a matter of concern for us all, because we're paying for Irish water. The Dáil pays for, the Exchequer rather, pay for Irish water. The Dáil is supposed to supervise that. But more fundamentally, I'd ask that your government properly address this lack of infrastructure. Irish Water pleaded guilty to 5 of 13 charges with regard to the Miltown Malbay plant in November 2022. I asked what they're doing about it, and they're going to carry out an assessment. Nearby is Spanish Point, an important settlement with no wastewater infrastructure whatsoever. And beside that is a third settlement, Quilty in Seafield, which is operating at only 51% capacity. I asked, is there an assessment carried out as to whether that sewage could be brought from Spanish Point, which is an important settlement? You may have visited it, Taoiseach. Lots of people have. It's a lovely place to visit, except for the fact that, of course, your sewage is probably flowing into the sea untreated. The same is true of Carrigaholt, beside an SAC as is Spanish Point. Go up to Doolin, another beautiful settlement, with the same problem. So if we're not going to solve that problem now, when we have a huge surplus, then when are we? Are we saying that this is kind of optional expenditure, that we'll wait until we've spent a couple of million euros in the European Court of Justice and been forced to do it? Or are we actually going to stop shitting in our rivers in this state in 2023?
Thank you, Deputy.
Thanks, Deputy, and delighted to have the chance once again to clarify things or to repeat what I've said before. I've never said that we can't use some of the surplus to increase spending on infrastructure. In fact, I've said the opposite. Yes, we can use some of the surplus to increase spending on public infrastructure, and that's exactly what we intend to do. I didn't catch the interview, but I think Minister McGrath said much the same thing on prime time the other night, and the Minister for Public Expenditure, Minister Donoghue, said so as well. So yes, we are examining the NDP ceilings, and we'll use some of the surplus to increase spending on infrastructure. But I also need to be very frank with you, Deputy, as well. It's not just as simple as increasing the budget for a government agency or for a semi-state. There are other constraints as well. There are many public bodies that are unable to spend the capital budgets that we assign to them, not because they don't care, not because they're not working hard, not because they're somehow not competent, but because there are other constraints. Sometimes it's finding skilled staff. Sometimes it's materials like the availability of steel or concrete or timber. Sometimes it's planning issues. Sometimes it's legal challenges. And we're actually in a different position, a very different position than we were when I was first appointed to government 12 years ago. We are often unable to spend the capital budgets that are assigned to government departments and agencies because of constraints that are nothing to do with finance or the competency of the people who are involved in it. They're to do with other factors which I've mentioned. Just in relation to the particular matter which you raise in relation to Miltown Malbay, Spanish Point and Seafield, I am told that Iscaran is working on the issues raised in the prosecution and is currently carrying out a strategic assessment of the site, and that will include all of the feasible options to resolve the wastewater needs of the area. A project to upgrade the plant will be progressed once this has been completed, and Government is providing Uiscaren with sustained investment, and Uiscaren is using this investment to improve services and remedy the fragility that is apparent in some parts of our wastewater service and networks. Uiscaren manages all aspects of the water and wastewater services planning and is responsible for the planning, delivery and operation of all public treatment plants. The Government is eager to see faster progress on these projects wherever possible, and the budget provided to Uiscaren this year is 1.56 billion, which is not a small amount of money, and will be higher again next year.
Deputy McNamara.
How much you've been told. However, Clare County Council have been told something entirely different, that they're not looking at Spanish Point at all, Uiscaren, and they're not interested in including Spanish Point in an upgrade, nor are they interested in seeing could Spanish Point be catered for at Seafield, or indeed could Miltown be catered for, could all three of them be catered for at Seafield. They're not interested in Spanish Point because it's not sewered, and because it's not sewered they're saying, well, it's not our problem, and Clare County Council are saying, well, it's not our problem either. And the same is true of Carrigaholt, a wonderful little town. It was a town, I suppose it's now a village, but it can't develop. There's huge scope for sustainable development, but it can't develop without a sewer. Spanish Point has developed, but it's at its limits now because there's no sewer. Doolin is the same story, no sewer. So Irish Water are saying, no matter, I don't know what they're telling you, but to me and to everybody else they're saying, well, it's not our problem. And Clare County Council are saying it's not our problem. So we have a kind of a bureaucratic, on top of the problems that you've outlined, we have created this scenario where it's nobody's problem, but yet the state, it is the state's problem, and the state can, and I say will be held accountable in international courts, and we're going to waste a lot of money defending actions instead of solving the problem.
Taoiseach.
Deputy, it is the state's problem, and the state has a role to play in resolving it, and I agree with you on that. I'm advised in relation to Spanish Point, it is regarded as unsewered and relies on private individual systems such as septic tanks, as there's no public wastewater treatment plant or public sewers present. Last year, Minister O'Brien announced the commencement of a new funding scheme targeting the wastewater collection and treatment needs of villages and settlements without public wastewater access, such as Spanish Point, and that's something that I strongly support, because I think any settlement should have decent wastewater facilities and should be able to have some level of natural expansion in terms of new housing and population, even if it's a very small one. I'm told it is open to these areas to bid to be included in this programme, or to otherwise receive funding for the provision of wastewater infrastructure, and Uiscaren will work with the Department of Housing and Local Government and local authorities to support the development and implementation of an appropriate solution.